Okay, before I start the seminar today, I would like to express my thanks for the kind host, HKSYU and the Center for Interdisciplinary Research and Evidence-Based, and for your kind invitation and the kind assistance from the staff at the center. And my stay here, my visit is very meaningful, and it's very glad to share a lot of my experience and hear and discuss with concerns and issues with colleagues and HKSYU, and also meet some old friends from Hong Kong. So this is my last seminar, but I don't think it's the end of our sharing and discussion. Feel free to contact me at NUS. I'll be there for at least 2 years before my retirement, 2020. So again, thanks, Prof. Yan, for your kind hosting. And so now my voice is a bit hoarse today because of my flu, but hopefully I can manage throughout the 2 hours. And today's topic is on treating individuals with mild post-traumatic distress symptoms. I'll divide the lecture into hopefully into 3 parts. The first part is just to give an overview of what it is, post-traumatic distress symptoms, the treatment overview, and then a evidence-based, suggestions for trauma-focused exposure therapy, session-by-session discussion, and then followed by a videotape. If it's not enough, I have more than 1 clip. Usually it's not enough time. And then hopefully there's time for some sharing and discussion at the end of the seminar. Okay, so without further delay, let me go to the topics. I think most of us here will have at least some knowledge of what is PTSD, because it's such a common term now. It's almost like depression. So most of us have some ideas of what it is. It refers to persistent, intense physical and emotional response to thoughts and reminders of the traumatic event or life adversity. Trauma, stress disorder has been first applied to war veterans and victims and a car accident, but now it also refers to various life adversities, which include like divorce and abuse and violence, etc. So it's a very general term now. But in order to be classified as a mental health disorder or mental health concerns that is covered by most insurance companies overseas and in Hong Kong, there are some mental health classification on DSM-5 as to what is PTSD formally as a formal mental health classification. So it includes both criteria A and criteria B. Criteria A, that it has to have a trauma events, actual or threatened events. It's very important. The threatened event is being added into DSM-5. In DSM-4, there has to be an actual traumatic event before you can diagnose PTSD. Like for example, it's threatened. For example, somebody threatened to kill you every day or very often. You can't call it a traumatic event in the past. But now they have added in the threatened events. Include death, serious injury, and sexual violence. Okay, it has not formally added road traffic accident, but it could be subsumed under serious injury, like robbery and things like that. And therefore, so in order for exposure to actual or threatened events, there are 4 types of exposure. Either you are a direct victim, you directly experience the traumatic event, or you witness. The witness is a very general term. You can actually witness it on the scene, or in general, nowadays with the mass media, social media, you can witness it through various channels. Okay, so witness is also defined very loosely and broadly nowadays. Or learned something traumatic happened to a loved one. So, for example, your significant others, your spouse, your children, your siblings have a traumatic event, and you learn about it. It could be also applied to you as a traumatic event. And repeated exposure to details. You actually you maybe not directly experience it. You're not a significant others, of these victims, You have not witnessed the trauma, but you have repeatedly experienced details. Like one of the examples is the first responder, the police, the firefighter, and more concern now is with the journalist. Okay, journalists, they might not be actually on the scene, but they've been interviewing and reporting details of traumatic events like earthquake, natural disasters. This would also be subsumed if they are keep exposure to these details. They could also suffer from PTSD also. So this is a possible exposure to traumatic event. That's the criteria A. And criteria B is that you have to have, experience one symptom from the intrusion cluster, one symptom from avoidance cluster, and 2 negative cognition, and 2 arousal. But this criteria symptom, you keep revising and revising according to different, addition of the mental health system. But for clinician or service provider, it does not matter. In order to have a diagnosis, you have to have this criteria. But for us, when a client comes to us, it does not matter for us whether they fulfill the diagnosis or not. If they need our service, if they need support and assistance, we are there to help them. So we are not so much focused on whether they fulfill the criteria. But for psychiatrists and for insurance company and for reporting, mental health reporting, system, they have to check off. Okay, so this is one thing so today's we are focusing on talking about how to help those who have mild PTSD symptoms, such as those who might not fulfill the full criteria for a mental health diagnosis in the DSM-5 or the ICD-10. But they're coming for us for support and assistance and for professional counseling. We are there to help them, okay? So, and most of the mental health classification or our understanding of mental health conditions is based on adult experience. We all know adult and children's experience are very different. We can, at least one big difference is that we can verbalize our experience. For small children, particularly for small children, the language development is not as good as us. They might not be able to vocalize or speak out the concerns, what's bothering them. So mostly PTSD symptoms in children are behavioral symptoms rather than self-report. So it's observation of the behavior. So one hallmark of children experiencing various traumatic events, even though they're not reporting the events, but there's a strong suspicion. Okay, if children are very small children, if they have nightmares, they cannot sleep well, they be regressing to an earlier developmental stage. For example, a 5 or 6 year old child starts sucking their thumbs again, bedwetting again, which they should have passed those stages, then it's a level of concern together with all those symptoms. If they're in school, if there's a sudden deterioration of school performance or sudden engagement for the rest of the class or the peers, they suddenly become very quiet and not talking to the peers, then then physical complaint. They can tell, I have headaches, I have pains here and there, but they cannot verbalize other symptoms that's listed on the DSM-5 criteria. So all this, it does not need to be include all of them. And usually 1 or 2 or 3 things happen in the child, observed by, mostly if the children is by caregivers at home or at school, the teachers reporting observations and the social workers' observations very important. So that's one thing about children. So without going, the diagnosis of PTSD or treatment of trauma focus been there since the late or middle 80s. So it's about 30, 40 years of clinical experience and treatment. So there are evidence gathered together, and these are the evidence-based therapy treatment listed on the best guidelines in the UK, UK, Australia, and America. So these different forms of therapy are supposed to be effective for trauma treatment, and they are evidence-based treatment. A big group is cognitive behavioral therapy. Another group is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing EMDR. So mostly, most of the counselors and psychologists, occupational therapists, psychiatrists will be familiar with the CBT treatment. Okay, so these are different types of CBT treatment that found to be helpful in helping people with PTSD symptoms. Seeking safety, prolonged exposure therapy, stress inoculation, cognitive processing, other CPT, including cognitive restructuring, cognitive therapy, and trauma-focused CPT. So, but this seminar is not going to include all of them, okay? We are focusing on those treatments that have received the most evidence to support that they are effective. Okay, and the 3 types of CBT treatment that have the most evidence to support their effectiveness for helping those with PTSD symptoms are the exposure therapy. In short, I put it PE, so later on with my slide, PE stands for exposure therapy. ST, stress inoculation training, and cognitive therapy, CT. The cognitive therapy, let's go down from below to up, these 3 types of CBT is slightly different from the others. Stress inoculation training focus on relaxation training in dealing with stress. And stress inoculation is a general CBT treatment for most mental health conditions. They're not specific to trauma treatment. So it's a general treatment for mental health concerns. Cognitive therapy, again, includes the cognitive restructuring, challenging people's irrational thoughts, ideas, and replacing these irrational ideas and thoughts with functional and realistic cognition. Again, this is a general CBT treatment for a number of mental health conditions. The exposure therapy is also a general treatment for a number of mental health conditions, especially phobia and anxiety. So it using systematic desensitization, which is a form of intervention to help people to relax under different levels of anxiety-provoking events. It's very effective for treating phobias, specific fears, okay, and anxiety. And flooding therapy used to be very popular. You know, I still remember when I was in graduate student in the mid-80s, don't start counting numbers, okay? So I was a graduate student in the mid-80s. My teacher was Mike Cabal. He's very famous for flooding, okay? So he still bring along the snake and, you know, kind of, so it just wrap around your neck. The first time you scream, the second time you just, you know, your scream becomes, you know, lower, and then the 4th or 5th time you do not scream anymore, because what your most fear is the snake will eat you, will bite you, you will die. Does not happen. The second time you're less fearful, the 3rd time, the 4th time, the 5th time you start playing around with the snake. So that's called flooding. So you are afraid of heights, so they bring you to a different level. So this is desensitization, okay? So confront fear, object, situation, memory. So again, exposure therapy is also a general CPT form of CPT, we call it behavioral therapy, okay? For specific fears, okay? And PTSD, to start with, when it first became a known mental health condition, it was grouped under anxiety disorder in the DSM-4 revision, okay? And then later on, it put it on a different, you know, it's still a stress-related form of disorder. So exposure therapy is particularly effective for this type of stress, anxiety related. So in itself, it is a general, you know, treatment. But if we put it trauma focused, then, okay, if we modify the exposure therapy to address the issue of PTSD and the traumatic event, we call trauma-focused exposure therapy. So it's slightly different from a general exposure therapy, Okay, now so this, do remember the PE, SIT, and CD stand for. These are the 3 types of CPT that's found most effective for helping people with PTSD symptoms. And there's evidence, okay. So let's talk about the trauma-focused exposure treatment. It's developed by Edna Fold in the mid-80s, has the largest body of research behind it. The rationale is confronting the fear stimulus. Now, counterintuitive to common sense is to let bygones bygone. It's not for this trauma focus. The focus, the essence of this exposure treatment is don't let bygones be bygone, because if you sweep under the carpet, it might not help the issue, because the issue is still there. If you don't get resolved it might pop up, again and again, particularly for those who have prolonged PTSD symptoms even years and months after the traumatic event. So it's confronting the fear stimulus, similar rationale to flooding, okay? And a common sense approach to dealing with anxiety, all right? And the fear stimulus is the memory. According to trauma-focused exposure treatment, the most fear stimulus is not the traumatic event, it's the memory. People, I think some of us might have this experience ourselves. It's so painful that I don't want to remember it. Even recalling is painful enough. Okay, so the fear stimulus is not the actual event, but the recalling and the memory of the event itself. It's just like anxiety about anxiety. Now this is the fear of the fearful memory. Okay, and goal is to focus on each element of trauma until the element no longer elicit as much anxiety. So that's the rationale behind trauma-focused exposure treatment. These are again some of the reasons behind why is it so effective. People try to come up with the explanation why it has gathered the most evidence that is the most effective for treating people with PTSD. It's one form of explanation is habituation or sensitization. So if you are fearful of anything, the more you encounter it, the first time, second time, third time, if you're brave enough to encounter it, it becomes less fearful. That's called habituation. Emotional processing. Sometimes the memories comes along with the emotion. Okay, we all know as human beings, we process information with certain emotion. And information paired up with emotion is more easily to be recalled and more easy to intrude in your memory, even though you've deliberately tried not to remember the certain event. But if that event has a very strong emotional element paired up with it, that event will happen by itself. That's one of the hallmark symptoms of PTSD, intrusion, nightmare. Okay, so for exposure therapy, when you recall the traumatic event, it gives you time to not just to habituate, but time for emotional processing, to process your emotion, and discriminate between remembering and being re-traumatized. Re-traumatized is being, re-experience the event, the memory without any new behavior or coping behavior. Remembering with coping behavior during therapy is different from re-traumatizing. Okay, increased mastery. Okay, at the same time with exposure treatment, we also teach the person, the individuals with some coping strategies. For example, if you find yourself, if those memories keep intruding you, how can you handle it? Okay, so if you suddenly, when you're working, those traumatic events, or for example, the road traffic accidents still pop up, and the blood and the smell of the blood keep coming up. So what are you going to do? Okay, emotionally, first calm down, do some relaxation exercise, and then what else you can do? Okay, to take your mind off this, to monitor this kind of flashback or intrusion. Okay, differentiation. One of the hallmarks of PTSD, if it's untreated, it will become easily generalized to not just the traumatic event or the feared memory of the traumatic event, but to generalize to other things. One example is a person got, badly robbed, physically injured during the robbery in the supermarket, or they had. One very good example, another thing is you go to some of the big chain supermarket where they're tightly packed with a lot of things, and the floor is very slippery. You fell off and hurt yourself and broken a lot of glasses, and you have to, not only you're hurt, but you have to make compensation, pay the supermarket back instead of receiving compensation for your injury because you've broken so many things, right? So it's very traumatic, okay? So if you're unresolved, one thing people, if things, that kind of things got the memory, traumatic memory did not resolve, instead of, afraid of, going into a supermarket, afraid of, going out on a rainy day, you can generalize to all outside, event that you start to just, stay home and not going anywhere. Another example is rape victims. PTSD first applied to war veterans. The second biggest group of people that apply to PTSD is victims of rape and sexual violence. Okay, people got this terrible experience by individual, perpetrator or attacker, and they usually, and sometimes if untreated, they would generalize to all other people. For example, if you are attacked by a male, then you can easily generalize to all males. And you're attacked in the nighttime, then you generalize to all day 24 hours, then you start hiding yourself. So PTSD, one of the comorbid or co-occurring mental health disorder is social phobia. So social phobia, that means you're afraid of any social interaction and you're afraid to go out. You just, you here and then you hear stories about people shutting themselves, boarding up, locking up themselves and then close all the windows with window boards against the windows, so they put themselves in a dark cage, something like that. So exposure therapy also helps people to differentiate what is your traumatic memory, what is a traumatic event, and how you do not need to generalize to other things. All right. So these are the reasons to explain why. Some of the reasons underlying the effectiveness of exposure treatment. Which one is true, we have no idea, but these are the possible underlying explanation. And another very good explanation, easy to understand, for fear conditioning. Okay. Now, for psychologists, we all know that so this is pairing. You pair an event for the unconditioned stimulus is the accident, you pair with the supermarket is fear. So the supermarket becomes a conditional stimulus. And supermarket itself is fearful already. And stimulus generalization, just like our examples, all areas outside your home. So if we can cut this link, okay, so if you avoid the short term, avoid going out, avoid all areas outside home, in the short term, you're less anxious. But in the long run, it creates another problem. Okay, so it's not functioning if you avoid in all areas outside home. So if we are going to treat this particular condition, fear, the PTSD fear condition, we have to cut this link, okay? Cut the link between, so it's the fear deconditioning, okay? So these are one of the reasons. These are another explanation about, people, how they think about it. The event happened. We give reasons and we have explanations, we have emotions, and then it helps us, all these influence our way of coping. Okay, so now we said that most of the evidence in support of prolonged exposure. Now, if we can summarize some of the evidence that is supported, provided by Edna Foe as early as in the 90s, as early as the 20s, we found that prolonged exposure, stress inoculation, and cognitive therapy all effective. Now, if you remember evidence-based, PICO, okay, the problem is that we want to treat people with PTSD. Intervention, all three are effective. So which one do we choose? So if we find out how do we learn from all this to put together a more effective treatment, and how it compared to any one of this, okay? So one of the things is that we have to look at the evidence. The evidence is now that all three are effective. But one thing is that all three are effective. If I add one to the other, would it be even more effective? Edna Foll's research was no. Okay, it's not 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, if you add two elements together, it does not mean it's more effective. And she also finds PE is a safe treatment accepted by patients. Effect lasts after treatment. And the good thing about PE is non-specialists can be taught to practice PTSD and some exposure for mild PTSD symptoms. Okay. Now, this is 2006 Journal of Clinical Psychiatry. Is a top journal. Okay. So she published in this paper and compared the three forms of treatment. And it's a multiple center. So these are 4 centers conducting all this, practice, and they try to find how effective. This is the PTSD score. The higher, that means the more symptoms. And this is pre-treatment for all centers, okay? If you look at this diagram for all centers, they found out after treatment, their symptom improve. They report less PTSD symptoms. So it's effective, okay? And then she also found, she also found Edna Foll in 1999 compared 3 types of treatment. Now, we always said that in order for your research to be more credible, it's not just your team conduct the study. It has to be replicated and supported by another team. Marks is another team in UK. Edna Foll is one team in US. So the 2 teams do similar research and compare the 3 forms of treatment. Remember, the 3 forms of treatment are found to be effective. One form is the PE, just the participant just received the prolonged exposure. And another team just received the stress inoculation. Another team received, both are effective. If we combine together, would it be more effective? So PE plus SIT, okay? And the waitlist control group, or those who did not receive the treatment but receive it later after the study is completed, okay? And MAS also do similar things. PE plus cognitive restructuring instead of SIT. Cognitive restructuring is just to change the irrational fear without actively doing the desensitization part of the trauma memory, of the fear traumatic memory. And then he also combined, cognitive restructuring is also found to be effective. If I combine it with prolonged exposure, will it be more effective? And then the R is the waitlist group. Now the diagram speaks 1,000 words, okay? This is a number of patients, number of respondents. So these are the PTSD symptoms that the number of participants reporting PTSD symptoms, okay? So you can see that both groups found that, which one, let's see, post-treatment and patient functioning. So this is so this is the higher the score, that more people receive better functioning. That means less stress symptoms, okay? It's how this reads. Percentage of patients responding less symptoms, better functioning. So as you can see, prolonged exposure is the best outcome. They had the highest number of people responding better functioning. In all groups, okay, so if you adding the 2 effective components together, actually for Edna Foll's study is not as effective as a single treatment. And there are reasons to explain that, because you're adding more, just like, sometimes people complain about combined degree. You have degrees, you still finish in 4 years, and you have to combine major, that means you learn less from each. There's a similar rationale for people to explain why you add 2 effective treatment together, still in the same number of sessions. People are not remember so many things. Okay, so that's why I keep telling programs, don't overteach. Okay, so that's the outcome. Okay, but it's not all rosy picture. It's not everything's rosy. It's found to be effective, but research also shows us only 30% of therapists using this form of treatment for PTSD symptom patients. Only 30% to 40%. Why? If it's so effective, why therapists are not using it? First of all, the types of patients that can go through this. Later on, we talk about contraindication. That means this group of patients should not be given trauma-focused therapy. There are 2 pages, 2 slides of it. So there are not all people, even if they have mild traumatic, even though PE is found to be the most effective, they might not benefit from it. Okay, and one thing is that you have to memory to recall and work on it. People, sometimes you divide people in concrete thinking and abstract thinking. Okay, it's just simple. For counselors, you probably know what I'm talking about. Just simple relaxation exercise. We usually ask people, the very easiest relaxation exercise to imagine you are on a very soothing beach, no work. And there are patients that, I cannot imagine there's a beach over there with eyes open. There's some people simply cannot do imagination. They're simply so concrete. Tell me how you feel. I don't know what I feel. And people can't tell, and you have to have quite verbal, patients, okay? And some patients are very behavioral, okay? And some patients very concrete. They can't tell the emotion, they can't imagine, they can't describe things. Okay, so this group of patients would not benefit, and this consider a large number of our clients. So at the end of the day, I just would it be so simple? You just give me pills. Instead of asking me how I feel, asking me to flex and relax, and then imagine I'm on a beach. Can't you just simply give me a Valium and something to keep me, relaxed, okay? And clients be able to disclose what actually happened in detail. This is also not easy, because a large group of PTSD symptoms are under traumatic events, are under compensation scheme. For example, road traffic accident, industrial accident. Those people, I would not say they deliberately lying, but they would not be so confident to release every detail of things, because whatever they talk about in therapy, we always say confidential. But if the court asks for it, we have to give it. Okay, if the court subpoena, we have to give it. So, and we have to explain to the client, okay, I will try best to protect the confidentiality within this therapy, but my confidentiality is limited if the law requires I submit my therapy progress, my therapy information to help the court to decide the settlement and whatever. So clients might not be 100% ready to disclose the details, okay? And potentially stressing with prolonged attention to traumatic memories is indeed, so you have to remember that we are asking the client to focus on the traumatic event, almost 2/3 of our sessions with them. Later on, with the 8-session therapy, you can count the 2/3 of our sessions as we're working on the traumatic memory. It's stressful, and my data show that along the line, the anxiety level goes up. But with the new coping strategy, with the new explanation, with the new understanding, the anxiety is slowly going down. I have real data from my own client to show you that's indeed the case. So that's a period. So it's the common sense, you get worse before you get better. So, and we also have to explain to client later on for the psychoeducation about what is trauma therapy, to explain it's all right to the nightmare to start coming back more frequent than you seek treatment. Okay, and don't stop coming in. It's natural. It's like I said, use the common language. You get worse before you get better. Okay, so this is, but particularly some of our clients, they want instant cure. Okay, a pill is better. I can sleep, but coming to you, the nightmare keep coming back more frequent. So what's wrong? Okay, so we have to explain to them, and it's their choice whether to go through this or not. Okay, and 20 to 30% drop out of the treatment. Even with all our preparation, what is it like? 20 to 30% patients still drop out. Okay, and that is not unusual. So it's not usual for just for PE, and for most psychological intervention, more than half, particularly in Asian society, more than half could not finish the entire course. Okay, if it's intended as 8 sessions, the most they can come, we found out the most diligent is 6 sessions. Most come for 3 or 4 sessions. So this dropout rate is not particularly bad, but do remember 20 to 30% of participants drop out of the treatment. Symptom worsening, exacerbated, and non-compliance. Now, in trauma-focused therapy, later on we see session by session, discussion. Similar to all CPT, we require the compliance of client to do homework assignment. I had to read articles, and myself also read articles about how difficult for Asian clients to comply with homework assignment. It's very difficult to ask them to keep a diary. Oh, I forgot, I'm so busy. But so usually a compromise is to do the homework assignment during the session. And so it's very difficult for us, our session has to be shorter than the Western society. They usually is 24 sessions, we have to cut it to 12, then cut it to 8, and cut it to 6. And then they're kind of doing their homework, and then when they first start, they discuss their homework. But our compromise that we do the homework together. So it's not homework. Okay, it's therapy work, but it's better than not. Like for example, later we talk about creating a fear hierarchy. Okay, so different level of fear events. So usually the client will do it at home and then bring it back the next session, and then we discuss it. But for most of the clients, we have to discuss it during the session. That's our limitation for Asian countries doing therapy, right? Only 70% of the use exposure, is a little bit more than that nowadays. 20 to 30% of therapists expose fear or re-traumatized. We have lots of fear, okay? Us too, because it's a complaining society, okay? And if people come in, usually, I don't think it's unique to Asian or Hong Kong client. Most clients coming want to be cured, the symptom to get better as soon as possible. But you're telling that it's getting worse. So if you're losing a client, so if they don't come, then there's no way to help them, okay? Perhaps our compromise is perhaps use a less fear, anxiety-provoking treatment, like the SIT, okay? They might not be as effective, but helping them to learn stress management, at least they come, okay? So these are our concerns. So usually nowadays when we do exposure therapy, if it's a trauma focus, it's very important to integrate preparatory skills prior to exposure. Before we do any of the exposure therapy, we have to help the client to manage the emotion. What if I get so anxious? What if I, become so anxious? Then what can we do? And provide client with coping skills to tolerate distress. Okay, these are the things that we have to prepare the client. So in the session, we will have a emotional regulation and distress tolerance, coping strategy. And then another thing, okay, my collaborator and I were talking about, there's a conference in Adelaide, one of the wine. The conference was held in a cellar. When I was in the airport, from Adelaide airport to the conference place, the taxi driver, where are you going? I said, it's a cellar. What? What conference was that? Wine tasting conference? I said, no, trauma focus. So he was so amazed, okay. You know, Adelaide, Australia, there's a lot, very good production, very cheap wine, okay. So, and during the conference, of course, my other colleagues drink a lot of wine. We had happy hour, okay, lunches from 1 to 2. We have session 2 to 4, 4 to 5 is wine, and the session was a lot of wine, 5 to 6 another session, 5 to 7 another session. But we all come out with some ideas. We found out that a large number of trauma survivors not only had a lot of co-occurring mental health conditions. One condition we talk about phobia, social anxiety. Another, David Bryan was very vocal about that because he was initially working on panic, okay, and he found out that a lot of PTSD symptoms, they also, because of traumatic event, they develop panic symptoms. You know, panic symptoms is that you have a sudden fear of death and you become, it's very scary. I start to have that after my, one of my health concerns many years ago. And now if anything similar to that happen, it's very scary, okay? So that's a panic symptoms. So Brian and the colleagues, they found out that one of the things that happen with PTSD symptoms is the panic symptoms. And panic symptoms is also subsumed under the anxiety disorder, a very extreme form of anxiety disorder, okay? And luckily, panic symptoms had very good, response to psychological, of course, when you really panic, shortness of breath, medical treatment. But when you're acute or before you develop panic symptom, there are a number of psychological interventions that has developed to help people. So they suggested perhaps if we want to make trauma exposure therapy more effective, it's not by combining other effective treatment, but to attend to some of the characteristics of individuals with PTSD symptoms. One characteristic, and not everyone have the panic symptom, but at least for those who have panic symptoms, perhaps we add a component, panic management. Then would it be more effective? Okay, so that's our intervention. And so it's a new intervention based on evidence that panic treatments, psychological treatment be quite effective. And people with traumatic event, and even recall of traumatic event, the panic symptom might come up. So a new, an integrated approach. So it's not building a new therapy, but to expand, integrate some of the components into the already effective to make it more effective is panic management, to add a component to it. Now, like I said, not all clients are benefiting from this non-effective treatment. Contraindications. I've been talking about it for a number of sessions. I teach trauma psychology at the undergraduate level at Singapore, many years. And 1 year, during the final exam, the question was asking, can you explain the contraindication for trauma-focused therapy? And one student come up, raised their hand. They was allowed to ask questions in the first 10 minutes. I said, what is it? What is contraindication mean? What does it mean? I said, oh my God. This is during the final exam. Contraindication, that means these clients should not be given trauma-focused therapy. So that's what contraindication. Now remember to explain every word to the student. So it's a traumatic event for me, okay? So for those, what type of client? So you can probably, think about it. Current severe multiple substance use. Okay, one of the very frequent co-occurring, almost more than 1/3 of the client is substance users. We do not know which one is a chicken, which one is an egg. Is a substance user more prone to traumatic event, or because of the traumatic event, they use substance to help them to go through, to tolerate the terrible experience? But we only know that 30%, almost 30% of the people with PTSD symptoms also may be substance abusers. So for those who are severe and multiple substance abusers, it would not be given. But it's not absolutely not given, but there's a way to do it. But if it's very severe and multiple, we do not give it. And again, before everything else, if it's a very severe PTSD with ongoing life stress, with suicidal ideas, with hallucination, and you should not give prolonged exposure. You should not give psychological intervention to begin with. Let them stabilize with our medical psychiatric colleagues first. Okay, so don't be too overpowering with the power of CBT. Okay, when it's severe PTSD with severe comorbid condition like severe depression, severe psychosis, severe substance use, we should lay back and refer to our psychiatric colleague to stabilize with medication first. After they stabilize, then we work with this type. History of impulsivity. Basically, impulsivity, you do not try anything. You have to work with the impulsivity first. Ongoing life crisis, particularly suicidal ideas. Okay, you have to treat. If life crisis, handle the life crisis first. And if there's active suicidal thoughts, handle the suicidal thoughts. Okay, although we list even though in the middle of the treatment, no, I'm in the middle of session 4, I have to go through it. If there's reporting of suicide, thoughts and ideation versus attempt, you have to stop everything else and deal with the suicidal thing. Fail previous treatment with exposure. Don't think you are much better than the other therapists. Oh, it's just maybe I'm better. I'm a good therapist. I'm more experienced. If they failed previously, you probably will fail too. Okay, so your ego may be a little bit more modest. Okay, so history of non-compliance, history of dropout, history of those, particularly those and history of mental health professional shoppers. People keep seeing different types of mental health and different psychologists and psychiatrists. So those are probably even though you're very experienced, very good. Okay, do not try the luck. Okay, and recent claim for compensation. All right, another slide for contraindication. Difficulty in using imagery. We talk about it. Absence of re-experiencing symptoms. We have to have symptoms, and there's findings is very interesting. Those who have mild symptoms usually the best responder to psychological treatment. Okay, those who do not report active symptoms, first of all, they won't come to you. Okay, but they keep saying that I'm fine. This is my husband and my mother, my daughter, my psychiatrist want to talk to you. Those who probably would not benefit from your treatment. Trauma focus, inability to tolerate intense arousal, history of psychosis, severe co-occurring psychiatric condition, long-standing disorder with serious social and occupational impairment. Okay, so these are the contraindications. So these are the general rationale for exposure treatment. Exposure should be carried out live whenever possible or in vivo. We first start within the lab, okay? Fear exposure with the fear hierarchy. Start with the lab, the therapy room first. For example, people fear of anxiety provoking. Okay, you don't do that. in the theater first. You do that in the counseling room first. So for example, someone with PTSD symptom after road traffic accident, to help them to recall the memory, you bring them to the traffic accident scene. No. Okay, you bring them to the North Point one. No. Okay, do that in the therapy, in the safety of the therapy room first. In vivo, use imagery first. Then, of course, the best is the life. Okay. In imagery, maximize stimulus cues in all sensory mobilities. Don't just ask them to imagine. Also ask them to have all stimulate the sense. I remember I also used this example. A road traffic accident with the mother and the child crossing the road, and the child, somehow got hit by a car, and the child got injured, was in hospital, not very severely injured. But the mother was okay, and the worst part is the mother is okay. So she was in tremendous guilt and then report PTSD symptoms even after the child was discharged. So we asked her to record the scene, and then also asked them to smell, I can smell blood. Okay, so it's more vivid to help them, to recall the memory. Of course, it's not the first session. Try to smell the blood, okay? So it has to do gradually. So in imagination, it's a key how to use help your individual for the to recall those fear memory. Those memory has been, effectively sweeping under the carpet most of the time, but it was uncontrollable that it popped out suddenly. So that's the intrusion, the nightmare, okay? So you deliberately ask him to recall the fear, traumatic memory in the safety of the anxiety room. How do you do that? Just say imagine, Sometimes you use all the senses, okay, to help them to imagine. Grade is very important, step by step. Start with the less anxious provoking, okay? And for example, for public speaking anxiety, if you want to help them, so before you end, remember you're asked to do assignment on public speaking. It's anxiety provoking, but it's tolerable. Remember, then the next level is that imagine your assignment is Monday, this is Saturday, this is a week before, less anxiety. A day before, more anxious. And before you before you enter the lecture theater, more anxiety provoking. And before you speak, much more anxiety. And a person challenge you in the middle of your well-prepared speech is even more. So you grade it, okay? And prolong, continue until the anxiety. Why is it called prolong? Exposure session continue until anxiety is reduced by about 50%, okay? Now, how do we know the anxiety? This is the fear thermometer. We will refer to this as SUS, okay? And then remember this term when you saw the video, okay? The fear thermometer. 0, total relax, 100, highest anxiety. So our goal is to help them to create a fear anxiety hierarchy. And then each level is to start with the less provoking. And when you ask them to recall, before you do anything else, you call up this event, this memory, what's the anxiety level, 50, 60, 70. And then after the recall and after to relax, do the relaxation exercise. What is that after that? Maybe reduce or may increase. So this is a fear thermometer, the SUS. And then the fear traumatic event, we call it hotspot. Okay, so the different hotspot, the more anxiety-provoking hotspot. So these are the terminology you will see in the video later on, okay? And treatment sequencing is very important because PTSD often do not occur alone. Like I said, most of them occur with some other things. If they occur with significant life stressor, suicide, stop, do not use exposure therapy first. Do something else. But if it's PTSD with mild depression, then what is it first? Okay, it's not a fixed and fast rule. Okay, the sequencing treatment depends on individual cases, and the condition of the severity, intensity, and frequency of the different mental health concerns. In general, a PTSD client also report depression. we consider treating PTSD first because as the PTSD symptoms overlaps a lot with the depression symptoms. If we treat PTSD successfully, reduce the symptoms, in general, the depression symptoms also improve. So in general, we treat PTSD first. PTSD and substance abuse, we talk about, it always co-occur, substance abuse always co-occur. Which one goes first? Consider both conditions simultaneously. But myself, if it's a substance abuse, like alcoholic drug, you can go through both treatment at the same time, okay? If not, treat the substance abuse first, okay? Because if you abuse substance, it impair your cognitive functioning, impair your judgment, and impair your compliance. So my preference is that if they cannot be treated together simultaneously, then consider treating the substance abuse first. Then after it's stabilized, then you followed by the PTSD treatment. That's the sequencing. Now, we start off by adding some components to make the exposure therapy a little bit more, perhaps more effective. One is the panic management. How do we manage panic? When we are about to experience panic, a sense of impending death, how old is it? So these are some of the things found to be effective. Distress tolerance skills. One type is self-soothing, another type is, all this imagery meaning. So I would not go detail. The slides will be uploaded in the PowerPoint in the website. So in a nutshell, is use some ways that, use all your sense to self-soothing. Okay, imagine, you're looking at beautiful flower, think about a pleasant, hearing, some good music, things like that. So self-soothing methods, all right? And why is this, how to apply in my daily life? Empty. This has to be discussed with your client, okay? Because individual client, these are the examples. Which one is the best for your client? You have to discuss with your client, okay? Just like as a reward and punishment. If no point, you give the reward where the person receiving the reward do not value the reward. I give you $100, I give you 200 back, not to bother me anymore. So you have to make sure the reward and the soothing, whatever is really indeed soothing for your client. So you introduce these other ways, think about it, and then what is the best for you in your daily life, okay? So this, why is it empty? It's left for individual client to discuss with the individual client. So there are other ways, imagery, meaning in life, prayer. If you have a very religious client, prayer is very effective, okay? And relaxation and vacation, things like that, okay? There's no point in it. Take a vacation where there's absolute, I cannot take leave, I have no more leave, things like that. So this is empty because you have to discuss with the individual client. So these are the distress tolerance skills. You have to talk, you have the fear thermometer, you have to explain to the client. It's very important because later on you ask them to call the fear imagery, and then you ask them to rate how fearful it is, 0 to 100. And if they become very distressful, what can they do? If they have feelings or impending panic, what can they do? These are the things to discuss beforehand. Okay, so these are the general things. So we go to the stages of psychological treatment by itself. I had a bad example of a student going through, I'm so good in this session. I go through 1-to-1 session, on the menu, chapter 1 to 4, things like that. But first of all, this is a general thing, no matter what you do, what kind of therapy you do, and stages of psychological treatment in relation to our trauma-focused exposure therapy, stabilizing and engagement. You have to engage your client. It's very important, particularly if you don't want early dropouts. Okay, You have to be friend, build a relationship. In psychodynamic terms, build a working alliance. Both of you are willing, view this form of therapy to be potential use for you, and both are willing to go through a slightly more anxiety-provoking situation before you get better. And both are willing to spend the time in working towards that. So engagement, stabilization, to check the anxiety level in the average daytime, okay? So on average, is the client in a stabilized, situation, particularly if we're treating a mild post-traumatic symptoms. These are the client who go to work, still go to school, still carry out most of the daily life, except they were bothered by their symptoms once in a while, to the extent they have to take leave every now and then. But for the severe type, we have to do other forms of psychotherapy, a more intense one. So stabilization, education and information. Okay, this is very important about what is trauma, what is PTSD, what is the therapy, and things like that. Anxiety management, okay, and imaginal and in vivo exposure, and relapse prevention and maintenance. We structured these 5 stages in the best practice in Australia, UK, 16 to 24 sessions. We've concentrated to 8 sessions. Okay, I tried to do it in 12 sessions. The first 2 weeks I had a grant to do it. Nobody came. After the 12 session, because ideally they come weekly. No way. Bi-weekly. 12 sessions bi-weekly, 12 times 24, that means half a month. Almost half a month with holidays, no way. Though we have to concentrate into 8 weeks. And within 2 years, we managed only to get 30 participants going through the entire program. Okay, and not to mention about, I totally agree with Ruth, it's unrealistic to have a comparison group receiving just prolonged treatment. Because if we don't have a comparison group, we can never answer the question, what happens if we don't add the panic management component? Will I add the panic management component better or worse, like adding another component? My original idea, most studies' original idea, is to add a comparison group with the non-effective treatment and the waitlist group. But realistically, I can just present you the data with the ones who go through this additional component. Okay, so so how I structure, or if you're going to do it, how do you structure it into 8 sessions or maybe 6 sessions? Okay, I think realistic 6 sessions is more realistic than 8 sessions. Okay, so basically you structure 1/3 of your time about initial 3 sessions that include the education and the panic component. So you add the new component into the first 3 sessions, or 1/3, the first 1/3 of the session. The first initial 3 sessions, including trauma education, anxiety management, panic management, and distress tolerance. A lot are teaching. Okay, you explain to the client in terms they can understand, and a lot of them require the person to practice at home. Okay, so this is compliance, not just talking to you in the okay, by the way, this type of therapy in the Western world is 90 minutes. Make me think about my body massage. 90 minutes. 90 minutes, hour and a half. We make it 1 hour. And in Hong Kong, half an hour. It's true. I do therapy in both places. Half an hour, mostly. So think about what we can do, okay? So, but that's what we can do. I don't think client will come for 1.5 hour session for 6 sessions or 8 sessions. Then the rest is the usual found to be effective trauma-exposed focus exposure. Include obtaining a narrative or traumatic memory. You have to talk about the traumatic memory, construction or exposure hierarchy, graded imagery, and in vivo exposure to fierce situation, and relapse prevention. Okay, so these are the 8 sessions that I have scheduled in mind to do it in 60 minutes. You know, in therapy, 60 minutes is 50 minutes. I was conditioned to every 50 minutes counter to your thinking. I'm sitting in front of the computer all the time. Every 50 minutes, I had to go to the toilet because our clients every 50 minutes. So we conditioned every 50 minutes we have to do something else. Okay, so that's the situation. So now this again, I won't be able to go to detail. This is what we do. Before everything, we have to engage to write a manual for our project and for this 8 session panic management plus prolonged exposure therapy. Okay, so the first session is, anything with a star is new component in the session. Okay, so every session, session 1, of course, everything is new. So session 1 is socialization to treatment. Tell them what treatment is about, what trauma is about. So what are the symptoms and what are the normal cause of PTSD, okay? And explore the fears, reservation about the treatment is because we have to respect the client's wishes, values, and the time investment. And this is the period we start to build a relationship and get them engaged, okay? And a lot has to do, this engagement, a lot has to do with your personality style, okay? I was never a warm, supportive therapist. I come from very straightforward, and some clients, are not particularly, accustomed to my style, and I have to explain to them because there's stereotype or 2 different type of therapists. One is sitting on a chair like Kelly Chan, okay, and one is very yes, that's nice. So very warm, supportive. I'm none of those. Okay, I'm very factual. Okay, but so it's a matching of the client's preference and sometimes the therapist's personality, how they come across. Okay, and of course, regardless what style is that, the very first therapist personality or attribute that we must possess is we ask ourselves, do we believe in our way of supporting or helping our client? Or just do it because my supervisor asked me to do it and my agency is, asked me to do this, and it's evidence-based. Okay, do you believe it? Are you comfortable with it? Okay, and do your client comfortable with it? When you're comfortable, when you believe it, you also come across as confident and as relatable to the client. Okay, so that's something, and you speak the language of the client as well. Okay, now this, I usually work with adults. I am not particularly working with children, okay? If I work with children, the only thing I can do is to play with them. I use so-called play therapy. So this is very important. The first session, building relationship and getting the engagement and homework. Okay, what do they think about it? Okay, we talk so much. What do you think of? What is your goal? You also explain to them what is your micro goal, what is your medium goal, and what is your long-term goal. Okay, the client said, I want to have all my symptoms gone. You have to explain this is a little bit unrealistic. Even with drug, with medication, it takes time. Okay, and client to start using form to monitor trauma, trigger, and avoidance situations. Now you see in psychology, particularly in CPT, we believe the ABC model. A in the antecedent, You also explain to the client behavior and consequences. Your behavior usually don't happen alone. For example, just nightmare. Is it every day you have nightmare? No, some of the days. Okay, why don't you put down when you have a nightmare, think about what happened the day before, or what happened 6 hours before you go to sleep. And then they say, oh, that day, oh yeah, I met my mother-in-law. Okay, and then keep a dialogue and see a pattern. Every time you meet your mother-in-law, you have the nightmare coming up. Okay, it's true for my client because her mother-in-law blamed her for not taking care of the daughter, letting her running across the street and got hit by a truck. Okay, so that's and then what happens after your nightmare? Okay, I wake up and sweating, I cannot go back to sleep, and then I headache, and then I go to work, and then wondering what I'm doing, and I call in sick, things like that. So this is, if you cannot do homework, then you do it very quickly during the session. Okay, so this is so much you need to accomplish with half hour or 50 minutes. Session 2 is a new component. It's a star. That means you still do the things. Okay, you finish what you cannot finish the first session. And then you start session 2, you start introduction to the panic management. Okay, if it's a 6 session, perhaps the first session you have to start. So it's this sequencing. So after engaging them, explaining everything, then you start talking about panic management. So you explain it's very common, some of the other symptoms on top of those PTSD symptoms do occur. You have a sense of impending death and you're breathing so hard and things like that. And how do we manage them? And you start introduce the fear thermometer. Okay, and not every day we think about our anxiety at 0 to 100. Okay, start thinking about the fear situation, from 0 to 100. Okay, and then to exercise them with, now you have nightmare. You told me you had nightmare 2 days before. Do you remember what's the anxiety level back then using the try this exercise, or maybe 70. Now when you talk about it, what is the anxiety level? Oh, it's not, it's 60 when I talk about it, things like that. Start exercising using the subs because it's very important. And breathing training, okay? Now you start doing the relaxation exercise. To start when you have this feeling of impending death or this very feeling anxious, we have tendency to shortness of breath, we breathe very hard. When you find that, start to learn how to slow breathing. Oh, I do a terrible mistake. One time, I was teaching this at not this relaxation exercise in personal growth in a class of 200 undergraduate. The first time teaching is 1992 at HKSYU. Let's practice relaxation exercise in a class of 200. Close your eyes, relax. People start laughing. They're not doing what I'm talking about. They start laughing, okay? So anyway, with your client, you start teaching them relaxation exercise. There are very different forms of relaxation exercise. One very easy, imagery is not the easiest way. Usually, the easiest way is a progressive muscle relaxation. Is ask them to tense and feel the muscle and relax. And keep it that way. See how different it feels? I don't get laugh. This traumatic event again. Start to close your eyes. Everyone start laughing. And I said, oh my God, I never do it in a class of 200. Okay, so start doing that, and then and nowadays mindfulness also add on to that. Pay attention when you relax your muscle. Pay attention to breathing. It goes so slow. And your body start to feel, calmer and things like that. So start teaching anxiety relaxation, breathing exercise, and relaxation exercise, and still do the others. The homework client to continue using form to monitor the ABC, the triggers, and practice breathing exercise at home. We usually give a tape, for them, including, breathing exercise, progressive relaxation exercise, and the imagery. Actually, we help to produce the division clinical psychology. I don't know if they're still using it back in the old days. So for us to use and give free copies to our client. And these they had to practice at home. It's no point just practice once in the therapy room and assume you know how to do it, just like swimming. Okay, the tutor can only teach you how to swim in the 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the swimming class. The rest you have to practice. So we have to give this example to a client. The things you learn in the therapy room or in the counseling room, you have to do it at home as well, just like a swimming exercise or whatever you learn, you have to practice, okay? Now, session 3, still on the panic management. What's new? Progressive muscle relaxation is for anxiety management. And then the panic management start to teach them to discuss with the self-soothing technique, what's best for them, and improve the moment. And then introduction to exposure, okay? And talk about the exposure thing, what is it, what we're going to do for the next 5 sessions, which is a very important component. And you have also need to use what you have learned in the first 3, a particular dose stress management and distress tolerance into this next 5 sessions. And homework. Each time the homework is slightly different. Practice breathing relaxation and progressive muscle exercise. Practice distress tolerance skills and develop own ideas. And session 4, what is new here? Of course, you everything that's not finished then, and before you start with any session, ask them how they feel. Do they still remember what's happening, and what do we talk about? If they don't remember, you repeat what you have talked about. Okay, because in any things like this, people only remember, for other people in a lecture like this, they remember only 60 to 70% at best. Okay, and for our client, they have problems, they have PTSD symptoms. The best they remember what you're talking about is less than half. So you have to check how much they remember, how much they practice. If they forgot, you have to repeat. Okay, some clients are very smart, and some of the clients are also very smart, too smart. They borrow all the books from the library and said, you should go to this, you do not teach this. Did you have clients like that? Yeah, we do. We have some clients are so eager, they search everything on the internet and check, you have not done this, when are we going to do this? Okay, so then you have to pace them accordingly. Okay, and explain why you are not doing this. Okay, so you start the exposure. The next 4, 5, 6 is do the exposure from the lowest level, less anxiety provoking. For example, okay, using my traffic accident with the mother and daughter thing. So you help them create the fear. The fear hierarchy regarding the accident, and identify different hotspot, the time that they become anxious. So the list is that we are going out, me and my daughter going out, picking her up after school. Okay, it's anxiety provoking. Okay, even think about that. At that time, the daughter was still sick leave, but if she go back to school, I have to pick her up. It's anxiety provoking already. And then just the idea of need to pick her up after school. And then the next level is that I will pick her from school, and I have to go to this crossing. So do not need to cross that. It's anxiety provoking. The next level is, you walk during the red light or green light? I forgot. Green light. The green light is on. I have to start walking with my daughter. The anxiety, very anxious. Look left and look right, very anxious. And look left and right. Okay. So at the next level is I'm in the middle of the crossing. So, and saw the car coming, stopped in front of me. Saw the car coming. And very, very anxiety provoking. Okay, things like that to build up the hierarchy. And then these are the hotspot. And then the fear memory is that I started walking in the middle, and the truck was straight to us. Okay, it slowed down, but it still ran across us, and it was stopped in front of my daughter. And the next level, it was run over my daughter. And the memory, the next level, my daughter fell down. And the blood, and the next level, I don't remember anything. And then next level is the ambulance coming. The next level is in the hospital, things like that. And so that was how you create. So each level you start doing the exposure, relaxation, and how to do that. The tape will tell you what to do, to show you, some of the examples. So 4, 5, 6, okay, you do that. 7, so you go through this different level, identify different hotspot, and what's new is the evaluate hormone coping, client to repeat narrative, increasing intensity, and then reconnect with here and now, discuss exposure experience, and do a little bit cognitive, during that time. Also, you remember exposure therapy also involves some cognitive restructuring, some of the irrational fear, okay? Some of the, why is it so anxiety provoking? When they saw the car coming but stopped and the daughter fell down and the blood was coming, the fear was my daughter has died. But in reality, she has not died. She's not going to, because the car does not run over her. Just stopped, but the blood come out from she fell down on the ground, the reality. But she, in her memory, it's not like that. It's a distorted memory. And she was so fearful, and particular people don't remember, don't think about it anymore. Let bygones be bygones. Just live on life. So she miss all the detail. Okay, then we help her through therapy that think about, very anxious. Help them to calm down. Then think, what do you think at the time when you saw blood coming from the daughter and the car stopped in front of her? So I thought she was going to die. Did she die? But no, the car did not. The car is running over her. Think carefully what happened there. Where's the car and where's the daughter? Oh, the car is some distance between the car and my daughter. Then, slow down. When she realized that the car did not actually run over, then her anxiety and relaxation exercise from a set of 80, go down to 60, 65, 50, and then keep this think more, remember more. Then what's next thing you think about? I saw blood. Anxiety goes up. Then where does the blood coming out? From the ankle, from the kneecap. Okay, is it all over the place? No, not so much. Then she started to feel okay, but in her memory, it's all over the place. The car was running over her, but in helping her to feel relaxed and then go through this fear, traumatic memory, she find some of the things are distorted and exaggerated. It's not the actual situation. Then if we help her to see the things, and then a lot of related irrational fears that I'm to blame and she's going to die and all those things kind of also resolve a little bit. So the car did not run over the red light, it just stopped, and then so my daughter is not going to die. So thinking, and she's in the hospital, she gets out and things like that, okay? So that's the situation. And then in session 7, we have to do some relapse prevention, okay? If your nightmares start coming up, and the same thing with your daughter, blood all over, and the legs were falling out and things like that. Sometimes they can vividly tell you the nightmare. So what do you do? Oh, it's exaggerated. Now I can, my nightmare, sometimes the client also told you that my nightmare changes. It's not so bloody anymore. So they also changes. Now, it looks like it's so ideal, but for my client, because it's a private case and she's afford to come in, because as a lecturer, as academic, I don't see client every day. I pick the good case. And those who afford to pay me as a private client usually pay 20, 30-fold more than they see in outpatient clinic. So these are very motivated, highly educated, with all the good indications. So we will manage to go through more than, I think her, because there's some issues working with the mother-in-law as well later on. So I see her for about half a year. So so if not, session 7, you have to do relapse prevention. Okay, session 8, go through relapse prevention and what to do, and onward referral if necessary. And we always said that if the symptom improves, you explain to the clients, we have come to the point that you need to practice all this new behavior when the symptoms, happen again. The happens will not go away all of a sudden. It goes away gradually. But you tell yourself it's okay for the symptoms to come. I now know how to do it. And maybe the first few weeks after not seeing you, I might not do as well. But as I practice more, as I'm more experienced, I will do better. So you give a sense of mastery to the client that this is what usually happens. And then the symptoms will not go away so soon. It will be with some symptoms, but it gradually, either less intense, less frequent, and the form and the content also changes as you understand some of the things that actually happens. And you know how to deal with those anxiety, and you know how to deal with those irrational thinking and the memory. And should you need to come, you can always call the agency. Don't call individual client, because I think most of you understand we want to link up the client with the agency rather than individual person, unless it's a private client, okay? It's very dangerous to link up with individual person, okay? Link up because we don't know, we are not there every day. We might be on vacation, another traumatic event. I have a client I take on not as a private case, but this is an interesting case. Someone could attach to me so closely, and it's fulfilled my ego because nobody was with her. So she didn't know how it feels. So I take her on, and then to the extent that she was always in mental health crisis. She cut herself every now and then, and almost most exposed. She cut herself in all exposed part of her, okay? So you can see attention seeking or whatever. So at one point she cut herself in the thigh, and then check in. I always ask her to check in. If the case like that, don't call me. And check in the emergency unit of the Prince Wales Hospital back then. So she listened to me very well. Told her that when she checked in the emergency room, I want to see Professor Tang. I don't talk to anybody. I just talk to her. Of course, they won't call me up, and then they lock her up. And then the psychiatrist the next day called me that, is this your client? She don't refuse to talk to anyone except you. Are you coming to see her? No. I said, she had to learn to talk to other mental health professionals. That's my traumatic event. I might be doing something not quite right, allowing my client to attach to me so much. They should attach to mental health professionals and organizations. Okay, so that's our plan. So now this is a tape. I have to explain the background of this tape. This is a tape given to me by, as a gift. I can't afford to buy it. With unlimited use by Mark Kramer. He's from University of Melbourne. He's very famous in this area. So he's one of my collaborators in my research. It helps to put together everything. So in these clips, this is not Mark Kramer. He's not so young. Okay. This therapist is seeing a client with PTSD symptoms linger for after the client experienced aggregated assault robbery and get hurt. The symptoms did not seem to go away, and so she come for treatment. So this is so we did everything. So we can't afford to go from step 1. There's altogether 8 clips. So I give you clip 3. This is almost to the last day, the very last part. And this is what we call a breakthrough. Okay, finally, usually when we show you the clip, it's always the breakthrough. I always ask students, just family therapy is not exciting as you think. All you see may be, 15 minutes happen in 1 year or 2 years, therapy. Okay, all you see 15 minutes, not every day, like every session like this. So after several sessions, there's a breakthrough. Finally, she goes to a very hotspot, very anxiety-provoking hotspot. And then she was, because of the steps that worked to us, so managed to keep her anxiety level to a tolerable level and continue to remember the event. And then she was managed at that anxiety level to find out her concern, her fears at that time during the event. And that event lingered on, and because she don't understand why she still had the PTSD symptoms. Okay, why she cannot get over all this. Okay, it's not a big robbery, no serious physical injury, but she still had these PTSD symptoms that does not seem to go away. Okay, so let's see. This is my collaborator, Mark Kramer. If I know how to do play. Why is it not moving? Okay. It's totally gone. I need your assistance.
Up until now, we've been working basically from a habituation
Magic
model,
touch.
with the idea that the longer the client stays in contact with the feared stimulus, in this case the memory, the more the anxiety will come down. Perhaps a better way of conceptualizing it though, and particularly when we're talking about exposure in PTSD, is from an information processing paradigm. In other words, we may be able to access new information and integrate that new information with the traumatic memory network. In the next clip, we'll see our therapist working with Julie on a different hotspot, and this time we'll see some new information emerging.
And then I fall to the ground.
What are your SUDS now, Julie?
About 80.
Okay, you're doing well.
And I'm on the ground, but I try and get up to my knees, and I can feel the concrete on my knees, and he kicks me back down, and then I'm on the ground, and he's walking around me, and I can hear him behind me, and then I try and kick him. I try to get at him, but I can't reach him. And then he kicks me in the back.
Doing well. You're doing well. What happens next?
I can hear him yelling at me, and he's still yelling at me, and then I'm really scared, and then he comes around in front of me, and I'm really scared, and then he kicks me in the stomach, and
It's okay. You're doing really well, Julie. What are your SUDS now?
about 95.
Okay. Just stay with it. What's happening now?
I'm on the ground, and I roll into a little ball, and there's nothing I can do, and I just press my knees up and hold on, and I lie there in a ball, and he just keeps walking around me.
What's going through your mind as you're lying there on the ground?
I think I might be pregnant.
Okay. Okay, stay with that. What are you feeling?
I'm feeling really scared, and I just want him to go away, or someone to come and make him go away. And I can't fight him anymore. I have to stay like this.
You're lying on the ground.
I'm lying on the ground and I can just feel the ground, the concrete, and I can smell grass. And
Okay, you're doing really well, Julie. What are your suds?
about 85.
Okay, you're doing really well.
And I can see his shoes when he walks past, and they're scuffed and brown. And
Right. What's going through your mind now?
I've got to protect this baby.
Stay with that. What are you feeling as you're lying there and you're thinking that and you can see your shoes still walking around you? What are you feeling?
Oh, I feel really, really scared and sad if he's done anything, and how I just want him away.
You're doing well. What are your suds now, Julie?
About 80.
Okay, doing well. What happens next?
Some important new information emerged there, information that might be helpful to Julie in understanding her behaviour at the time and her reactions since the assault. This is an ideal opportunity for the therapist to do some cognitive restructuring after the exposure has terminated.
So just to give you a feeling of how it was like during the session. So for this woman, she couldn't understand why her fear was so severe and then still linger on, because at that time, when she was attacked, she thought she was pregnant. But indeed, later on, then she found she's not pregnant. But at that time, during the attack, all she think about, I might be pregnant, and I have to protect my baby. I've tried my best to protect, but it doesn't seem I can, protect, to warn away the fight against the attacker. So this was, to give you how to feel the session goes on, how new information that we can get from her. Because all this, because it's too fearful, usually they don't come up to the memory. So this is what, now in doing the treatment, we usually do some kind of outcome assessment. Particularly if we are doing evidence-based practice, the assessment of the therapy, both during the session and after the session, is very important. For us, there's two types of assessment. The one type is self-report, paper and pencil, psychological, as reported by the client, and we also had another set reported by therapists. We also, because it's in collaboration with my collaborator, we also have a medical objective component, is that before they come to a therapist, they have to take blood, because with the PTSD symptoms, because there's a certain blood level of adrenaline is usually higher than normal, and if we had more resources, we can do some brain scanning to see, because we find PTSD symptoms processing, fear stimuli in a different way than other people. So we also had blood tests at that time before, for each session, and then after the session, after the treatment, after completion of the treatment, and 6 months later. And I never hear anything from my medical collaborator, because maybe he's still analyzing the result. But I got some results from the self-report. For the self-report, we have to assess the PTSD symptom. Okay, at that time, we're still using DSM-4, it's not 5. But we assess the depression, the anxiety level, the quality of life, the post-traumatic condition, how do they think about the world, the danger of the world, and the credibility, expectancy of the therapy. And this is a very famous, a scale for measuring PTSD symptoms. And they're going to revise it with the new criteria for the DSM. Now, this is the data for 30 participants. It's the average data, okay? So it's not an individual data. Okay, individual may behave different, but if we average out the 30 participants over 6 sessions, session by session, each session we measure the anxiety level, depression level, and stress level. Of course, because PTSD is anxiety-related disorder, and then we're introducing anxiety-provoking memory. So the most things that we need to check is the anxiety level, session by session. It starts off with here, 12. And then you can see it goes up because it goes down the first session, the second session, because you still remember we're still talking about psychoeducation, all those are more information type. As we talk about panic management and then teaching exercise, starting with less anxiety provoking, the anxiety level, because we teach them anxiety management, stress management, they manage to keep their stress level lower than when they first come. But 5, 6, why 6? A spurt, a hike. If you remember the session by session plan, session 6 is the time when they were confronted or they were given the most fearful anxiety-provoking memory. So the anxiety level goes up. This is what we call worse, becoming worse, and it's higher than when they first come. Okay, if you don't engage the client well, they will complain that you're malpractice, you're not doing things that make me worse, and write to the newspaper and write to blah, 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 blah. So the anxiety level goes up, but we manage, because we teach them skills to manage. So we make sure they practice skill, and then we said, if anything happens, you can always call the agency. But if you do have the skill to manage anxiety. So the anxiety level goes still a little bit higher in session 7. And when they know that, sometimes when they say, the treatment is completed, they feel so relieved. Okay, so they go down. Because we always end up in a positive note. Okay, we always say that, remember, the symptoms not going to go away easily, it might linger on, but now you have new behavior, you know how to do it now, and in session you show us how you can do it. And sometimes we show this individually, because individual also have the individual chart, we also show them. Okay, so you manage, even though you're very stressed. When you first introduce the fear hierarchy, talk about the fear thing, it goes up, but you manage to keep it low. And it's very natural when we talk about the most stressful thing that you become very anxious. But the next level, you see, you start going up. So we also show them the chart, okay, to help them feel better. So session 8, by session 8, they say, I'm cured in a sense. Okay, so the anxiety level, the depression level also, this is not a treatment for depression, but we need to check the depression level. Now you see, even though it's not a specific treatment for depression, the depression level also improves as compared to when they first come. Then the green one, okay, also goes down. So so that's why the sequencing, if depression and PTSD together, we treat the PTSD first. Okay, this is document, evidence supporting our sequencing. Okay, so even though it's not specific treatment for depression, depression gets better and stress level. Okay, so this is the session by session outcome. The key outcome measure is the PTSD symptoms from 0 to 70. The higher, that means the number of percentage of client or is the percentage of symptoms that we report. So the high number, the worse, okay? So we want the number to get lower. So, and the green, what is this color? It's supposed to be green. It's before treatment. And then, where is the 6 months? It's not showing up. Oh my God. That's a bar, okay, for 6 month follow-up, but it's not showing up on my slide. I think it's not showing up everywhere. Okay, so, what? White color. What's the, can I check the color? I must show it. The data. 6 months. Okay. Okay. Lucky I do it myself, so I know how to do it. I asked my assistant. Okay. Okay, let me fill it up first. Okay. Okay, key outcome measure. Oh, let me see if I got it correct. 6 months. Improvement. Okay, it is the other way. Percentage of improvement. How many participants improve the symptoms? The higher the number, the better. No? Depression person. No, it shouldn't be the way. Improvement and post-treatment. Oh, okay. No. It's the number of symptoms, 0 to 70. Okay, we want the number to go lower. Okay, so we divide it into the key outcome: panic, coping, PTSD, and anxiety and depression. Okay, so the lower the bar, the better. Now, the green is a pre-treatment, the blue is post-treatment. We usually, of course, post-treatment should be better, but the most thing that we want to know is follow-up. Do they maintain the gain? Do they really benefit? Do they really practice? So the red one, that's why I must show it, is the key thing that we're looking at. And do we need booster dose? You all know booster dose. Should we call them up to come up for maybe a half an hour booster dose, booster therapy, okay, to make the treatment even more effective? So without the booster dose, what do we see? Panic coping, okay, because it's not a treatment for panic specifically, okay? So that's why they totally forget about it 6 months later. Okay, that's another suggestion, that if we want it, really believe that we also need to handle the panic, so we should strengthen the panic management part in our, in our next plan intervention. PTSD is good, okay? Actually, the best result is what? You can tell: depression. Anxiety is not as, PTSD is anxiety disorder, okay? So it improves a lot during post-treatment, but it goes up again, although it's not as high as the pre-treatment. So it's also a suggestion that between the post-treatment and 6 months follow-up, we need some kind of booster dose, okay? Maybe even sometimes a booster dose might not be coming in. A lot of research showing that just a telephone call to remind them, remind them the breathing exercise, to do things and this and that. Just a 30-minute, telephone, or right now it's online. You develop some apps and show them, that this is to help you. So just some reminder, and so it's so the anxiety, the treatment specifically target the lower and PTSD. We are quite good. General anxiety is still there; it goes up. And depression is better than we expected. Okay, this is a key outcome. Other cognitions. So because we also, with new information, we try to change the way of thinking. Negative self, negative working, and what negative was? Negative world view. Is the world a safe place to live in? Is the world that is full of supportive people? So general world view of people. So self-blame. So this one, the higher, the worse. Okay, you want them to be lower. Okay, so as we said, the good thing is that the treatment tend to quite effective in reducing people's negative thoughts about themselves and about the world. Okay, but the self-blame, okay, it's less than before, but 6 months seems to go up a little bit. Traumatic event, the self-blame component is quite big, because a lot of people, I might be, for victims, they say that, I might be doing something, not to ask for it. And the war veterans, remember this is particularly designed, for people, soldiers, returning soldiers. And returning soldiers of this PTSD, one of the very recurring theme is that, they always had nightmare the comrades died, or they're not helping the comrades. So there's a lot of self-blame. Okay, road traffic accident, I have not doing enough to help, So the self-blame, even though it's lower than pre-treatment, but it seems to go up at 6 months post-treatment. And quality of life in general, okay? Again, this is higher the better, okay? So in general, physical quality of life, as we all are very familiar with this measure, include the physical quality, psychological quality, social quality of life, and environmental quality of life. The world is safe, the environment is, things like that. So quality, I'm able to go out, I feel safe going out, things like that. So as you see that after treatment, there's some gain, but 6 months later, as the other depression, you do also think about in relation to other assessment. The depression gets better, the anxiety gets better, the PTSD symptom, the world will get better, the quality of life also improve. Okay, so that's my research. So it's an evidence-based research. It's interdisciplinary because I work with psychiatry, two disciplines. Work with psychiatry and psychology. And so we come up with a general plan and we integrate our thinking. So their thinking is that we need objective outcomes. So self-report is not good enough. So they take blood, okay? So that's one example. And so I wouldn't say it's a very successful one because we have not been able to recruit. We intend to have 30 in each group, 30 in the new treatment, panic management, prolonged exposure, a comparison group with just exposure, and a waitlist control group. We just had enough patients. As the psychiatry referred the client to us, as soon as we got referral, it's no randomized trial. And there's no randomized. Just put them in the active treatment, the new treatment group, just to see how, because that's how difficult it is to conduct this type of research in this part of the world. So as according to time, it's perfect timing, 8:59. But I also would like you to stay behind 5 or 10 minutes for some sharing and some questions.